Cardiff City back in the Championship. Only a one-season stay in League One, and we are going to celebrate every morsel of what's been a fantastic season. But, George, it probably took them a bit longer to confirm it than we might have guessed sitting here 6 to 8 weeks ago. I think it's important not to get bogged down on what's been a slow end to a great season, because at their best, they've been a joy to watch, a real collective, and at their best, they made the game and they made winning look quite easy. But to think that it's been easy would be to forget where they were maybe before a ball was kicked and how we saw things pre-season.
Yeah, like you say, 6 to 8 weeks. I even thought probably in October that we would see Cardiff secure promotion up to back to the Championship pretty quickly, because they were probably the first team in the EFL that looked like they were of the obvious quality and better than the rest of the league, and they would go up. And obviously they're not going to win the league. They're not even going to come close to winning the league, with Lincoln City doing that. But it's been an amazing season. And just because it became obvious early on doesn't mean that we shouldn't step back and look at the bigger picture and see what an incredible achievement this has been for Cardiff. Because let's go back to last season and even further beyond, where Cardiff City finished in 21-22, finished 18th. They finished 21st the season after that, just escaping relegation. 12th in the 23-24 season, and then finished bottom of the Championship in the 24-25 season, finishing 24th. That season, they had a ridiculous managerial progression from Errol Bullitt to start the season through to Omaritza, who came in for a time, and then they finished off getting relegated with Aaron Ramsey as the manager. Like, it was, I think when you go in that kind of order, it's quite clear to see that things haven't gone to plan. If you look at the stats for over the course of the 24-25 season, they were 18th for possession, they were 20th for expected goals for, 24th for big chances, 19th for expected goals against, 17th for touches in the opposition box. Like, in every single metric, they were poor, like bad in possession, didn't have the ball much, didn't create very many good chances, conceded loads against them. And off the pitch as well, it's always been a club that's had some unrest with Vincent Tan, the owner, in charge. And in January 2025, ahead of the derby against Swansea, there were mass protests. That discontent only grew louder as the season kind of spiraled out of control, and they ended up getting relegated. So, yeah, of course, this has been a good season, but it's come off the back of, back in, when they lost 4-2 on the final day against Norwich at the end of last season, this didn't feel like it was on the cards.
And we've been very critical of the way the club has been run by its owners and those they employ to run the club and set strategy. And we weren't surprised that it ended in relegation. They were punished for that. But there was obviously going to be quite a lot of work to do. They needed a manager, and we wondered what they would do about a playing squad that had massively underperformed, but was still somehow quite expensive even in Championship terms.
Yeah.
And then it's not like they suddenly acted and had a very clear and coherent plan.
I've never really seen this happen before, and I think I would love to go back into my head and at the beginning of June and think what I thought of Cardiff then, because obviously it was a underperforming group of players, but we still saw Gutas leave, El Ghazi, Mate, O'Dowda, Aaron Ramsey, Joe Rawls, Andy Renomota, Jamilu Collins. Like, these are players who were in their first team the season before. Manswerk, who was in on loan from Ajax. Like, a lot of those players weren't playing particularly well, but were of a certain quality, and certainly the likes of O'Dowda, Mate, El Ghazi. These are players who had played a lot of their football in the second tier, and they didn't really bring anybody in. Mm-hmm. Similarly, it was painfully, it's obvious to anyone that Aaron Ramsey wouldn't be taking on the job shortly after the season ended. They didn't appoint a manager, who we'll get on to, until the 16th of June.
Wow.
So the last game of the season was on the 3rd of May. Cardiff City fans, like, desperate for some action. All these players leave, and then nothing happens for 5 or 6 weeks after relegation. It's absolutely bizarre.
I think they were the last team, I'm 99% sure they were the last team in the EFL to sign a player as well. And, like, you never want to be that team.
No.
If you're a fan, you don't want to be the last team to sign a player.
And when they kicked off the season on opening day with a 2-1 win over Peterborough, they'd only signed one player, and that was Nathan Trott. 2 more came in before the end of the window. Omari Kellerman came in on loan from Chelsea, and then Gab Osho, who'd played for the manager in a previous loan spell, arrived too. Both of them basically signed just before the window closed. And it felt then like, how can the worst team in the Championship lose all of its players and still expect to compete in League One without really strengthening?
Well, because, and we kind of touched on this in the Lincoln City video in a very different way, transfers don't win football matches. Teams do. And transfers are important, but they are perhaps not as important as many people think.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, in many ways, Cardiff City had been left behind, I think, by a lot of teams in the Championship in terms of the way that they operated, in terms of managerial appointments, in terms of, you know, a really, really poor transfer record in the Championship. But in one area where they hadn't been left behind, crucially, was with the academy. And Cardiff City's academy has been and had been churning out a crop of really promising homegrown players. Now, in Joel Bagan and in Ruben Colwill, you had two players who were academy graduates who had already established themselves as first-team players in the Championship with some promise. Like, in both cases, had shown what they were capable of, even if maybe in Colwill's case, a lot of Cardiff fans would have wished they'd have seen it more often. There were bit part players who this season we've seen turn into huge players for them. Cian Ashford, Dylan Lawler, Joel Colwill, Ronan Capaccio, they've all played over 1,500 minutes this season, having been on the fringes previously in the Championship. There's also a crop of young players who weren't homegrown, but had been brought into the club young. Ollie Tanner, Will Fish, Alex Robertson, all had played a part in the Championship, but hadn't really, shown themselves of the quality that they would have. Then Youssef Salek's a slightly different case, where he was bought for a lot of money by Championship standards, albeit a young player, had proven himself to be very good. And he only turned 24 in January, so still a young player, but there was no doubting his quality. But even so, that's 10 outfield players I've just named there, who were part of the first team squad the season before, none of whom are 25 years of age at the time of Cardiff's promotion. So, yeah, they lost all those players, but whether by design or by accident, it feels like the secret to Cardiff's success was effectively being like, right, we've got this group of players. We're going to invest our time and money in them and resource in them rather than going out and signing a whole new crop.
And I'd love to know if that was something truly strategic from a footballing level, or maybe they'd spent so much money and they didn't really want to spend much more because I was going to say they saved themselves a lot of money by taking this approach, but I suppose it's more they avoided spending way more money on a whole new team. I mean, we're quite far through the video, George, and you are yet to say 3 words: Brian Barry Murphy.
Yeah, I think important to basically set the scene before introducing the main character of this season, because his input has been incredible, and often I think 2 things are true. I think firstly, often we can over-index the impact that a manager or head coach has. And I think often clubs appoint a manager who they see to be proven, right? In this case, the decision to hire Brian Barry Murphy, I think, was the pivotal moment for Cardiff City and probably the smartest thing that they could have done. Because whether it was by design or whether it was just a case of we can't afford to do this anymore, they had a crop of players that they needed to invest in. And they went out and they hired a guy who'd shown in his very short coaching and management career before that he was the right person to do this. Vincent Tan, when Brian Barry Murphy was appointed, mentioned that he'd managed at the level. And this was literally true, but he'd managed Rochdale at League One 6 to 4 years before, 2019 to 2021, at a time mainly during COVID, where there weren't fans in the stadiums for much of it. It ended in relegation from League One, and just in terms of Rochdale and Cardiff at League One level, yes, it's the same league, but it's just chalk and cheese in terms of expectation, fan pressure, everything else, quality of player. But even so, you look at the players that he managed or coached at Rochdale, some on loan and some permanent. You've got Robert Sanchez, who's obviously gone on to be Chelsea's number 1 keeper, rightly or wrongly. Gavin Bazunu, Reece Norrington-Davis, Aaron Morley, Ollie Rathbone, players who've gone on to have really good careers, who he brought into the side either on loan or permanently at a very young age. But then maybe most importantly, regardless of where their career is now, Luke Matheson, Ethan Brearley and Kwadwo Bar were all given their first team debuts when they were unbelievably young as teenagers, who were all blooded early by BBM, settled into first team football quickly, and then were sold by Rochdale for decent fees. And having the ability to do that is a really valuable tool when you've got this crop of young players, because that's exactly what Cardiff needed. He also then after he left Rochdale, went to work at Manchester City, managing their under-21s team. And there's an interview with Ben Fisher in The Guardian from December where Brian Barry Murphy tells a story where he was managing the under-21s. He had a player called Cole Palmer in his team, and Cole Palmer had come on for Bernardo Silva in a game against Burnley the night before they had an under-21s game against Leicester. And Cole Palmer had been so desperate to play that when he was coming on, he asked Pep Guardiola if he was still allowed to play in the under-21s game the next day. He did, and he scored a hat-trick and they won the game 5-0. Like, this is a player that BBM has had a genuine impact in his development, and he's now, one of the best players, one of England's best players. Romeo Lavia, Oscar Bobb, Liam Delap, like, all of these players came through the tutelage of Brian Barry Murphy. So for Cardiff City to identify him, and I guess take what is perceived as a risk and not go down the route of we're going to hire someone who's a proven promotion winner. Mm-hmm. We're going to hire someone who's proven at the level. We're going to hire someone who's, proven safe pair of hands. Like, they were like, we're going to hire someone who's proven at taking young talent and developing them and making them better and implementing a certain style of play. And he's done it incredibly well. Like, there are a lot of managers out there. We hear it the whole time. A managers are appointed where they say, yeah, I love the young players. I want to blood young players. I want to develop young players. But when the pressure is on them and they know that it's their job that is in the, that it's, potentially in the balance here, they tend to not take those risks and side with senior pros. But Cardiff hired a guy that only knows that way. He's done it once at Rochdale. That was his job at Manchester City. And it's worked, because if you look at the value gap now between Cardiff squad at the beginning of the season to Cardiff squad now, it is massive. Like, the likes of Lawler, Colwell and Capaccio are probably some of the most coveted young talents in the EFL. Kian Ashford as well. Like, not only have they improved as players, but their stature within the game. And if Cardiff wanted to monetize and wanted to cash in on any of their assets, the value of their squad and their young players now is huge.
And it's not easy, in fact, quite the opposite, to increase the value of your young assets while also consistently winning enough football matches to achieve your goals. That's exactly what he's done.
That's probably the most impressive thing of this, is that, he took over in mid-June. Their first game of the season against Peterborough was 6 weeks later. And in that time, we saw a complete overhaul of the playing style. Like, not just, okay, we're going to go from playing like backs to the wall stuff to then, dominating the ball, because I think there's an element where that's naturally going to happen when you come down from the Championship into League One, because your players are better. But they have this season, they've got the highest percentage in the league. They've scored the second most goals, second highest for XG, highest touches in the box, highest for big chances created. Like, very quickly, and anyone who's watched Cardiff City this season will see that, like, it's not possession for possession's sake. It is like an emphatic way of playing football, looking to get the ball down and play, but also be relatively direct whilst dominating the ball, if that makes sense. Like, passing forward.
They're fourth for fast break goals.
Yeah, I mean,
so if it's on to play, they will play through teams quickly, and they're dynamite. It's
a relentlessly attacking mindset and game model that BBM has implemented this season, and to do it so quickly with a young group of players, especially a group of players who, under Errol Bullitt for the year and a half before Ritza came in, had been coached to play a completely different way. And actually, like, when was the last time Cardiff played expansive football in the Championship? It's been a long time. Like, of course, there was some good stuff under Lamucci at times or Bullitt at times, but it was all like counter-attacking football. In terms of the defensive stuff, they're mid-table for XG against. That's often the case in League One and League Two when you're playing expansive football, because the technical ability of defenders means that, unlike in the elite level, heavy possession doesn't always mean controlling the game, because it can lead to mistakes. We've seen that a couple of times. But it's this amazing ability to get this young group playing at such a high level so quickly and be the best team. They were the best team in League One for the first half of the season before Lincoln went on their run. And it's not only the young players too. That's the other thing to really kind of force here. Like Perry and G, who's been a right back at Cardiff in the Championship, playing a completely different style. He's been brilliant this season. And most importantly, probably the player of the season for Cardiff is Ryan Wintle, who again has had to be like a bit of a dog in midfield for Cardiff for so many years. And he's now that midfield metronome that everything goes through, like a completely different role under Brian Barry Murphy. And he's stepped up and he's been an incredibly important player for them. And you look at Yusuf Salek, who's had a decent season, but he's been injured for much of it, and they adapted pretty well without him, with Callum Robinson playing sometimes, Amari Kellerman playing as a striker at times as well. Yes, they've dropped off a little bit towards the end of the season. They've still had some decent results and performances. I think losing the game to Lincoln, which basically ended the title race, meant that they've coasted a little bit towards the end of the season, but it's not a massive surprise. Like, it's an incredibly young squad, this. who are playing a lot of minutes and basically got the job done in the first half of the season. I've been so impressed with them. I think, the plaudits will rightly go to Lincoln for the work that they've done, and especially because Lincoln were the bigger surprise. But anyone who was watching this and thinks it's Cardiff in League One, it's not that impressive, it's completely missing the context here as to the ridiculous turnaround that we've seen in every level under the coaching of Brian Barry Murphy.
Yeah, I love it. I've absolutely loved everything from the first whistle of the season, really. It's been a great team to cover, a great team to talk about. However, when I think about next season, Cardiff back in the Championship, we know that they will look and feel very different, and I'm positive about that. I can see the path to success, and by success I don't mean promotion necessarily, but I mean being a more successful Championship team than they were coming down. But I also have some red flags, a lot of them based around, do I think that these owners and those running the club have learned from the previous errors of their ways just by making one good hire? We won't know at this point, but for me, I'm quite uncertain how next season looks, so I'm wondering how you think they'll do.
Yeah, it feels like Vincent Tan and Cardiff City have struck gold. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was by design, but I think they have struck gold. Like, they've got this amazing group of players with a manager or a head coach who's perfect for it, who will be incredibly attractive to other clubs as well, because of the playing style and because of his ability to basically just drive the value up of a squad, which if you're an owner is probably the most important thing you can do. There are definite comparisons to be made with Birmingham, who were a similar in terms of possession and the way that they looked to play the game in League One, albeit they were far more dominant and picked up way more points, again, with a far more valuable squad in terms of the actual money they put in. And you look at their struggles to implement that in the Championship. It's going to be fascinating to see how BBM can adapt, because I do worry that if he tries to just maintain the same game model and go about things in the same way, they could get picked off very, very quickly. And it's interesting when you look at Ipswich, who transitioned from being a team that ended up finishing second in League One, who are a possession-heavy side. When they came up to the Championship, they maintained their incredibly high-energy, out-of-possession approach, while also understanding they weren't going to be able to look after the ball as well. And that's what enabled them to make the step up so quickly. So this is going to be the first big test of Brian Barry Murphy, because we've already seen at Rochdale that he can continue to develop players down the bottom end of a league, but won't necessarily get the results, albeit the games will be incredibly exciting. So I'm interested to see what happens there. If you're going to be a top manager, which he could absolutely be, you have to be able to adapt, and you cannot only have one way of playing unless you're going to be managing Bayern Munich or Manchester City or others, as Vincent Kompany has shown as well at his time at Burnley. So cautious optimism. I think it's a brilliant squad. And as you say, there are, without too much changing in the boardroom at Cardiff City, it's hard to be overly optimistic about the long-term future. But with this crop and with this manager, if they can just make those, if they can adapt in a way that will suit the step up in quality, and if they can retain the likes of Colwill and the likes of Salek and Robertson, who's having a brilliant end to the season as well, then there's a group here that could continue to progress and hopefully mean that Cardiff City are in a far better position as a Championship side next season than they were when they came down. Yeah, and we'll be covering it all, obviously, on NTT20. If this is your first time watching or listening to us, please do subscribe. And Cardiff fans, let us know in the comments, what do you think we've missed, if anything? Surely George hasn't missed anything there. An exhaustive review of an amazing achievement. Let us know what you've enjoyed the most this season. Best moments in the comments below. It'd be great to hear from you. Cheers and go well.